the question is asked, is the dream and the dreamer still relevant? In the half century since Dr. King's speech, we have seen indeed some progress, but I have to report to you that the dream in which he spoke about has not endured. In the few minutes that I have, I want to share 4 areas in which the dream continues to be unrealized and for some in our communities, a nightmare. Number 1, access to wealth. In 1865, after slavery ended, 30% of the population owned half of all of the country's wealth. African Americans owned only 1/2 of 1% of the nation's wealth. In 1963, when Dr. King gave his famous speech, African Americans owned 1% of the nation's wealth. Today, we only own 2%. African American wealth has increased only 1.5% in 156 years. African American teenagers have the highest rate of unemployment of all racial groups. African Americans and Latinos continue to lag behind their white counterparts when it comes to equal access to employment, housing, and education. Despite the recent growth in economics, communities of color still lag behind. The dream and the dreamer is still relevant. Number 2, police brutality. Stories of police harassment and violence in communities of color are common. Young black men are 21 times more likely to be shot and killed by police than young white men. Of the 995 people killed by law enforcement in 2008, 21% were African American and 15% Latino. The dream and the dreamer is still relevant. Number 3, access to public accommodations. Recently, an African American state representative campaigning in her own community had the police called on her only because of the color of her skin. A few weeks ago, a registered guest of the Portland Doubletree Hotel was harassed by hotel staff, then with the aid of Portland Police Department evicted from his hotel room. The dream and the dreamer is still relevant. Number 4, voting rights. It took African Americans nearly 4 generations to gain the right to equal access to the voting booth after the Civil War. Even now, various states have passed laws and administrative practices to make it more difficult for people of color to register to vote. This past September, the Federal Civil Rights Commission found that our voting rights are under attack. Yes, the dream and the dreamer is still relevant.